into the second session of this, but I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Cheryl Barrett as the chair for this next session.
In this next session, what we're going to try and do is build on the first and explore some of those ideas with the what, the why, and the how. And it's going to be in the form of a roundtable conversation, which is quite difficult, as you know, on Zoom. And we do want to include all our participants as best we can, because we don't want you sitting passive. We are Principle 7 and we are a community. So if we're together, we need to communicate. So if I introduce people, and that will be in order that I've got here. So I hope it's the right one, and I hope it's the right panel, because it's been one of those days. And Pat, are you on this panel?
I think I am, yes.
Very good. So the first person I've got here is Mary Ann Brocklesby, leader of Monmouthshire County Council. Pat Dewby, Co-ops and Mutuals Wales. Rose Marley, Chief Exec of Co-ops UK. Yo. And Francis, Chief Exec of Cumbrian Credit Union. Anchor, I can see you, Anchor Wayne there, from International Editor of the Cooperative News. And Bethan Webber, Chief Executive of Cwmpas. Hi, Bethan. Nice to meet you over the screen. In terms of who starts, I'm not going to go in order. I'm going to go to Rose, and I'm going to go to Rose because she is CEO of Co-ops UK, and see if you want to pick up any of the rhythm from Debbie, and then others come in. Are you okay for that, Rose?
I am, Cheryl. Thank you very much for inviting me here today on the International Day of Cooperatives. It's a really exciting opportunity for the cooperative movement at the moment, and I'm delighted. I joined Cooperatives UK just over 2 years ago, and I come from kind of wider social enterprise movement, and there's been this correlation about female leadership in social purpose-driven organisations for a long time. The stats I found on it are about 10 years old, so I'm sure it's higher, that 38% of social ventures are led by women, which was already then twice as many as traditional business. But I believe that will be higher now. And if you just think about the cooperative movement, for those of you that heard the brilliant Debbie Robinson speaking from CEO of Central Co-op, yes, there's Debbie, there's Shireen at Co-op Group, there's Alison Hands at Lincolnshire in retail. But across the board, you know, in our infrastructure bodies, we have obviously we've got Anchor here from Press, but we've got Rebecca Harvey, who's the editor. We've got Liz, who runs Heritage. We've got people now in the mutual organisations as well, like Debbie Crosby Nationwide, and in the credit unions we have people like Sheena Young. And again, delighted to welcome Bethan Webber this morning to Cwmpas. And not only, and across Cooperative Bank as well, you've got Catherine Douglas and Maria, who are MDs across the bank. And not only is there a real strength of female leadership, and what I've really observed is a genuine opportunity, like the women that help each other. So as was mentioned earlier, you know, Cheryl is the Vice President of Cooperatives UK, and Cheryl's been phenomenal to me since I came into Cooperatives UK, just always making sure that I'm fully briefed and aware of all the nuances, and, you know, just really looking out for me. And Debbie was absolutely the same when I came in. So I really love and cherish that part of the cooperative movement that does celebrate women. And I think there's something about the makeup of women, and it's hard not to generalize when you say these things, but I did kind of start my official journey into kind of social purpose business when I was pregnant with my first child, Charlie, who's 18 now. And, you know, there was something about, there's something I feel in the makeup of women that talks to what Cheryl just talked about, principle number 7, care and concern for the community. You know, when I was pregnant with Charlie, I came out of the music and entertainment business, so real kind of capitalist, loads of wealth, loads of inequality in those sectors. And I really did see that kind of side of the world, and it really made me quite angry. And I think I'd always been always had that social entrepreneur in me. I'd never just really turned it actually into a considered effort in the way that I ran business until, like I say, I became pregnant with my first child. And as my mum always says, most people, you know, when you're sort of feathering the nest, getting everything ready for a child, you know, you maybe organise the nursery. And I've been trying to organise the whole world. Instead, I had that real, like, what kind of world is this? And you turn to the cooperative movement and you look at the principles around fairness and equity. And I think that's another thing, attribute as well of women. And, you know, for those of us that are mothers or matriarchs in families with lots of young people around us, you're always trying to be fair, you know, being fair to all your children, being fair to everybody around you. I'd love to know. I also do think your birth order might have a relevance to cooperation. I do think middle children are probably cooperators because they find that things are not fair and they go about wanting to set things out being fair. But I do think there's something in the makeup of women and the roles, you know, when we've been working with Siwa, for example, in India, you know, international cooperatives of women that are in caring roles, for example, or educating roles. And so like I say, it's hard because you're generalising, but it's just a pattern that I've seen that kind of role that women take in society generally really lends itself well to cooperating, to sharing, and to actually taking that leadership role. But yeah, you know, my main sort of takeaway over the past 2 years is that it's true, it's genuine. Those female cooperators do really cooperate and do really want to see progression, and it's been an absolute honour to join the movement because of that.
Thank you. I'm going to go now to Bethan, because I think there's a natural flow that could happen here with Bethan as Chief Executive of Cwmpas. So would you like to take your turn, Bethan?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to try and make it 3 minutes, but I've kind of been, amending my notes as I go. And I just think there's so much to say. And I just want to start really by saying I'm just really delighted to be here. So thank you for inviting me. I mean, it's incredible to be amongst such inspiring and inspirational, same thing, but we're a group of women and men as well. I think gender equality is quite complex, and we should be grounding, I think, it sometimes our thoughts about women and the impacts of various things, which I'll just kind of set out my thoughts on, in the fact that I think actually the way we've constructed gender actually does have adverse impacts on men as well. And that's not always a popular sentiment. But I think if we're going to move forward towards a fairer, more equal society, we've got to kind of address that as well at some point. But we're not here for that this morning. And happy International Cooperators Day as well. I'm really new to the movement in a formal sense. So I'm 2 months into my role at Cwmpas, and I'm absolutely delighted and privileged to be in the role. For those who, I don't know if everybody knows us or not on the call, but we are one of the largest development agencies in Wales, a cooperative. We support social enterprise and cooperatives to start up and grow. We've got housing cooperative projects, care cooperation projects, so a whole range of things, and it's growing all the time because, as you all know, and as I'm going to go on to set out in terms of my thinking, there is space for the cooperative model across pretty much everything we do. And I was really inspired in the previous presentation to hear that actually it could be applied to welfare as well, because so many challenges there. I think we can't really think about this morning without grounding it all in the global context. We are in tricky times. We've had a pandemic, a short, relatively speaking, short-term crisis thrown at us unexpectedly that made us have to react. That has deepened the poverty. We talk about the cost of living crisis. That's been a reality for many people, many families for a long time, but it's obviously deepened the impacts. And then we've got the climate emergency, which is, hurtling towards us, and we've been talking about for far too long. And all of these multiple crises that we're trying to deal with are creating incredible tensions politically, socially, and economically. And they've got disproportionate impacts for those that were already marginalised or underrepresented in our decision-making spaces, including women. And I was glad to hear young people mentioned as well, because I think a lot of the things that I think about in terms of women and our position relative to men, I think some of those challenges apply to young people as well, but in a slightly different way. But if we take poverty first, which is something that I'm sure we're all grappling with in day-to-day in our different roles, and it certainly affected me a lot more in my previous role, where I was the chief exec of a home start that support families through a volunteer model. So a lot of the values and principles very aligned with the cooperative model. The Senedd in Wales carried out some research and described women as the shock absorbers of poverty. And we know they've got the primary responsibility predominantly still for food management and domestic management within the home. We know the gender pay gap, it's already been mentioned, 60% of those on the less than the living wage are women. Childcare determines what work women do, how many hours a week they do it, their progression. The welfare system, it actually undermines people's ability to progress and work more hours, as we've already heard. And inflation is sometimes referred to as sheflation because it's having the biggest impact on a lot of the areas that women are still responsible for in terms of managing budgets for food and energy and fuel. Health inequalities impact women more, and poverty has a big impact on health inequalities. COVID has exacerbated all of these inequalities for women and for other groups. And the climate crisis is not gender neutral. As I've said, there's a correlation between gender inequality, social inequity, and climate change. And that's playing out for women. Women depend on the natural environment for water, food, fuel, and work in in low-income countries particularly. And climate change can be described as a threat multiplier, so it's exacerbating social, political and economic tensions. And for women, that can play out in increased kind of gender-based and sexual violence, human trafficking. There's a whole range of impacts. And when we think about those impacts, a large proportion of women, we've already heard people talking about their children. It's great to see a young person on in the call in with Cheryl there. Women are typically have families, not all women do, but a lot. So all of the impacts that we see on women are impacting children and families. And that means that children are not getting the best start in life. And for me, that grounds me in what I'm passionate about, which is fairness really, and social equality, and that every person born into the world should have the same opportunity to reach their potential in life and have the best quality of life they can, regardless of the circumstances into which they're born. And I'm really passionate about that. And I think in Wales, we've got the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which I don't think you can have a call like this and not mention it, because that is the lens and the framework through which we should be trying to tackle all of these elements. And actually, I heard Derek Walker, the new Future Generations Commissioner here in Wales, who was my predecessor at Cwmpas, and many of you will know him, talking earlier in the week about how we can't just continue to talk about the complexity and the challenge. There are things we can do to chip away, and actually we've got to start focusing on positive solutions. And for me, that's a really important point, because I think for anybody who is struggling with inequality, and for young people as well, and in relation to the climate crisis, we've got to start to have some hope. Otherwise, I think people are just so disengaged from finding solutions, and it's having a huge impact on mental health and anxiety. So I was really struck by the need for us to be thinking positively. And when we think about solutions, for me, the cooperative model provides a model through which you could address most of the problems that we're facing. I think what women bring, realism and lived experience, already mentioned. We bring a different lens, as do other diverse elements of our population. There's research now as well that shows that actually having diversity at a senior level within your business improves your performance. So the FTSE 350 research recently, but despite that, we're still underrepresented in business, but actually in cooperative businesses as well. And I think what co-ops can do for women, as I said, it's a model for addressing all those complex issues which have disproportionate impacts on women. And we can, Public Health Wales, the health services in crisis across the UK, Public Health Wales have published some short midterm potential responses. The midterm responses include things like improving energy efficiency and affordability, improved access to housing, addressing the issues in the food system, greater active travel. All of these are areas that affect women more than men, and they're all areas in which the cooperative model can play a really strong role in driving a better solution and a better outcome for people. And it grounds it in people having more power and control over the solutions to the problems that they're facing, which is something that I feel really we have to address if we're going to tackle the big issues. It also allows a model for fair work and community ownership of assets, and generally moves us towards that wellbeing economy. And obviously it gives women an opportunity to influence. Cooperatives are membership organisations. Anybody can become a member. Despite this, I think it's hard to find recent stats, but back in 2015, the last stats I could find, women were still underrepresented in senior positions in the cooperative movement. So it's really inspiring and fantastic to see and hear so many named today. I still think it sounds like there's work to do, but as I say, I ground that all in the fact that I'm 2 months in. So yeah, some takes from me, I think, and I've probably gone over my 3 minutes. So thank you for that.